Before we get started, there will be spoilers for the 1000-year Blood War arc of Bleach and for the light novel Can't Fear Your Own World in the video to come. Shuhei Hisagi's Kazeshini is one of the most popular Zanpakuto in Bleach. Back in the day, it took a long time for Hisagi to get his moment in the spotlight, with the character remaining almost entirely on the sidelines until the fake Karakura Town arc. But when that time finally came, it was accompanied by the epic reveal of his Shikai, and readers were blown away. The 1-2 punch of Hisagi's character finally getting to do something and his Shikai also being awesome really did wonders for him. Unleashed with the command Reap, Hisagi's Shikai takes the form of a dual-bladed kusarigama, essentially a pair of short scythes connected by a chain, with Hisagi wielding each blade in either hand. Combining Hisagi's ghoulish, sinister Shikai with his stoic philosophy on fear was a winning move by Kubo, and the 9th Division's vice-captain became an overnight sensation with fans. Since then, Hisagi and Kazeshini have both featured heavily throughout the series. Despite the excitement it generated upon its reveal, Kazeshini has always been a fairly simplistic Zanpakuto. Hisagi whips the two blades around like a furious whirlwind, disorienting his opponent with a tornado of unpredictable strikes and swings. Thanks to the chain connecting the two blades, Hisagi has complete control over the wild nature of the Shikai's movement, and in his tentpole fight against Findor, we see him using the weapon in a very creative manner, allowing him to get the better of the Fraction on numerous occasions before finally killing him. And for many years, we were perfectly content with Hisagi's Zanpakuto being just that, being what it was. Even if Kubo's treatment of the character himself met with a sharp decline come the 1000-year Blood War arc. But Kazeshini itself was pretty perfect, to be totally honest. It was devious and deadly, but simple and earnest as well. It didn't have a litany of special abilities or weird tricks up its sleeve. It was a melee Zanpakuto through and through. And despite Hisagi's distaste for it, it seemed to fit him perfectly. It was also one of the few legendary dual Zanpakuto, supposedly. But as the dust began to settle on the 1000-year Blood War arc and the supplementary material for Bleach began to trickle out, things apparently weren't quite as they seemed. The truth behind the secret power of Kazeshini was revealed in the light novel Can't Fear Your Own World's 3rd volume, completely upending what we thought we knew about the Zanpakuto itself, and perhaps even Hisagi too. So in today's video, we're going to take a look at the true ability of Kazeshini and how it changes everything about Hisagi's Shikai. Its power, its status as a dual Zanpakuto, and even its very nature. This is perhaps the truest Zanpakuto in Bleach. The one that best represents what it means to be a god of death. And so without further ado, let's take a look. So before we move on to the supplementary material, briefly, how is Kazeshini used in the source material? Hisagi's Shikai makes a few appearances throughout the story, with the vice-captain revealing it for the first time in battle against Findor, as the Shinigami attempt to defend the 4 pillars of the fake Karakura Town from Barragan's Fraction. As I mentioned a minute ago, really Hisagi's battle was the biggest deal of the bunch. He was the only one of the 4 Shinigami officers highlighted here that we'd never really seen in a battle before. And frankly, we hadn't really seen anything out of this character up until now. Admittedly, Yumachika too had barely been featured, appearing briefly in a battle with Ganju early in the Soul Society arc, but at the very least we knew something about him. Hisagi was a total blank slate. With the command Reap, Hisagi unleashes Kazeshini, carving through Findor's web of water and completely turning the tide of battle against him. We see Hisagi wielding the two blades via the chain, sweeping them through the air in a ruthless manner. Findor finding himself unable to turn his back for even a moment, lest the second blade be suddenly behind him. It's funny to think that Kazeshini's true power is so much more than this. When here in chapter 325, Kazeshini is described by Hisagi in such a succinct way, simply as unpredictable, isn't it? He whips around wildly. And that's literally it. That was all that was needed. There's something quaint about these simpler times in Bleach. A part of me does miss when a Shikai could just take on a different shape and be a melee weapon, but here we are. Anyway, outside of that, Kazeshini is also famously used by Hisagi to finish off Tosen after their brutal battle, with Hisagi stabbing his former captain through the skull and then releasing Shikai in a very creative and frankly disturbing usage of his Shikai's unique shape. He also uses Kazeshini's chain to try and get one up over Ion earlier in the fight as well, in again another showcase of just how this Shikai can be used in unconventional ways. And then, while Hisagi shows up a fair amount in the 1000-Year Blood War arc wielding Kazeshini, well, the outlook isn't so good for him, and he barely actually gets to use his Zanpakuto at all, despite it appearing on screen a fair bit. So then, what is the true power, the true nature of Kazeshini as revealed by the light novels? Throughout the entirety of the source material, we were under the impression that Hisagi was one of the few who wielded a true dual Zanpakuto, albeit the two blades were connected by a chain in a manner similar to Ukitake's Sogyo no Kotowari, and that was counted as one, so presumably this can be two. But, at least according to Can't Fear Your Own World, that turns out to be completely wrong. And in fact, outside of Ichigo's true Zangetsu, the concept of a dual Zanpakuto doesn't exist. And in this specific case, in actuality, the connecting chain is the true essence of Kazeshini itself, not the blades. That might sound a little weird, and truthfully, it is. Kazeshini turns out to be a highly conceptual Zanpakuto, and certainly not as simplistic as we maybe once thought. You see, Kazeshini represents the cycle of rebirth itself, the very basis of what it means to be a Shinigami. The blades represent death, as noted by Hisagi himself during his battle with Findor, but the chain, which goes overlooked in the source material, represents life, and in a very literal sense too. So the true power then of Kazeshini lies within the chain. It can restore any physical injury that befalls Hisagi, even going so far as to save him from death. When Hisagi suffers a serious or even fatal wound, the chain of Kazeshini will pull his body back together again, keeping him alive so long as he still has enough Reiatsu to do so. The power of Kazeshini is sufficient enough that it can restore Hisagi's body even if it is heavily damaged or destroyed, and Can't Fear Your Own World reveals that this is how Hisagi survived being sniped by Leal Barrow during the 1000-Year Blood War arc, just one of the many beatings he took in that arc and probably the worst of the bunch. Leal's shot goes right through Hisagi's body, through his shoulder, supposedly destroying his Saketsu and Hakusui, which should have finished him off, but instead Kazeshini acted instinctively to save him. Admittedly, there are some oddities with this revelation, mind you. For starters, it's implied that Leal has successfully taken out every other missing character off-screen. So was it only Hisagi upon whom Leal scored a fatal shot? Every other Shinigami around him, the likes of Isane or Kotsubaki for example, were just struck by the X-axis in a way that wouldn't kill them. It just seems awfully lucky to me that Hisagi is the only one who could have been killed, yet manages to have a subconscious way of getting around it, but there you go. Supposedly, the true power of Kazeshini is also how Hisagi was able to remain so steadfast during his brutal bankai training with Kensei and Mashiro, which now makes me wish we'd actually seen it. I mean, seriously, how violent did they actually get with him? In the novel, Kensei notes that he and Mashiro were at least half trying to kill Hisagi, even going so far as to note that watching Hisagi rise again and again during their training was more than just sheer tenacity on the vice captain's part. It was like he was immortal. But we get to see the true power of Kazeshini used in battle against Hikone, as the child slices Hisagi in two, completely splitting the vice captain in half across the chest. And it's here that something unexpected happens. As he meets death on the edge of Hikone's blade, Hisagi is transported to his inner world, the shadowy goblin-like figure of Kazeshini waiting for him. Of course, this is the first time we've ever seen Hisagi's inner world. I kind of wish Kubo had drawn a sketch of it for the novel. He finds himself atop a gigantic tree, towering so high that Hisagi feels as though he's above a forest or even a mountain. In this strangely peaceful plain, there's a creaking, rusted windmill turning lazily on the breeze. Already right here, the cyclical imagery of life and death is on full display. The spinning of the windmill's blades turns everlasting, while the rust of the decaying windmill is contrasted, of course, with the fresh, lush, verdant bloom of the tree. Kazeshini himself states that while he's no White or no Zarashi, which is really cool, the idea that Zanpakuto can recognize one another was brought up back in the Soul Society arc when Zabimaru was shown longing for a rematch with Zangetsu specifically. He does have something special up his sleeve too, something that makes him a little more shadowy than most. Kazeshini takes on the form of the cycle of life and death, because that cycle is integral to being a Shinigami, to what it means to be a Shinigami. And when Hisagi's life was saved, when he was rescued by Kensei from the gigantic hollow back in Turn Back the Pendulum, he knew then and there that that is what he wanted to be. And so that subconscious desire trickled down through his soul and began to formulate what Kazeshini would eventually become. Honestly, all of that is awesome. The rationale for how Kazeshini's true power came to be actually makes a ton of sense to me. It is very thoughtful and ethereal and really works. And it's interesting that it's here, when Kazeshini finally submits to Hisagi, that Hisagi understands the true essence of his Shikai, and of course later his bankai too. The book notes that the power seemed to come in the form of Hisagi comprehending the totality of Kazeshini as a concept, which in my opinion is a really nice way of encapsulating how a Shinigami comes to understand their Zanpakuto. We then watch as Hikone tries desperately to kill Hisagi, slashing him in two again, taking his arms off, and even blowing a serro through his chest to obliterate his heart. But absolutely nothing works. Hisagi returns good as new each time, with even his Shihakusho completely fixed as though he'd never been touched. Honestly, this power makes Hisagi extremely strong, and I do wonder why it didn't seem to rear its head earlier in the series. For example, when Tosen slashes Hisagi and then stabs him through the gut during their fight, when Hisagi later returns to deliver the finishing blow, he is quite clearly still obviously very injured. And the same, I guess, goes for when Hisagi is done fighting Aion. Aion basically crushes him before tossing him aside. And then when Hisagi returns to help Komamura, Komamura notes that Hisagi is clearly still very injured. Whereas if this was actually going on behind the scenes, I would have assumed that Kazeshini would have instinctively repaired Hisagi's wounds, but there we are. I guess it's highly possible that this true ability of Kazeshini hadn't really awakened until the 1,000-Year Blood War arc. We at the very least know that it was active when Hisagi was training with Kensei and Mashiro, but perhaps it wasn't prior to that. It's noted that Hisagi can be resurrected essentially, or have his body fixed over and over again, so long as he has enough Reiatsu in the tank to do so. But what does that really mean? Does getting outright killed multiple times in a row not affect how much Ryoryoku he has? After taking serious injuries again and again, does it deplete his Ryoryoku at all, his body getting physically weaker, his spirit energy, or does it have no impact whatsoever? It's possible, since he's not putting any effort into defending himself, that it doesn't cost him a thing. But Kazeshini will still be innately spending spirit energy to bring him back each time, with it presumably costing Hisagi more of his strength the greater his injury. So I mean, at least that seems like a potential weakness to me, but either way, this is a huge boost to the overall power of Kazeshini, to the point where it doesn't really feel like the same Zanpakuto anymore. So that's Kazeshini's true power summed up. Now, what do I make of it? I'm honestly of two minds about this revelation. I loved Kazeshini for what it was initially, and I don't think it necessarily needed this kind of complexity adding to it at all. It was perfectly good the way it was. I think making the chain the essence of the Zanpakuto in order to quash the idea that it's a dual Zanpakuto is a little bit of a cop-out. But on the flip side, I really like that Kazeshini represents what it means to be a Shinigami at heart. Hisagi as a character has gradually moved from his position of stern, senior, often silent authority to the lovable everyman Shinigami in a sense, which was of course propelled throughout the 1,000-Year Blood War arc and then really catapulted thanks to his starring role in Can't Fear Your Own World. And in my opinion, this newfound power works well with that new role that Hisagi is occupying in the narrative. Alright everyone, but that's it for today's video. Apologies that it's a slightly shorter one this time, but I'm working on something a bit heftier for you coming next week, so stay tuned for that. Let me know down in the comments though, what do you think about Kazeshini's true power, its true ability, its true nature, the fact that the essence of Kazeshini is found in the chain and not the blades? I'd love to hear all of your thoughts regarding these Can't Fear Your Own World revelations down in the comments below. Do you like it? Do you not like it? Do you prefer Kazeshini just being a simple melee weapon? Let me know all of those thoughts down in the comments. And as always, I want to end this video by saying a massive thank you and giving a huge shout out to my wonderful supporters over on Patreon. I really do appreciate each and every one of you so very much. Thank you. Without you, I couldn't really be doing this. If you love what I do here over on YouTube and you want to help support me that little step further as well, thank you. By visiting the link to my Patreon in the description down below, you can support me at the $1 tier, which gets your name in the credits of every single video, just like this right now. And by supporting me at the $2 tier or higher, you can get every single video I release absolutely free of baked-in YouTube ads. Alright everyone, thanks again. I really hope you enjoyed the video and you took something of value away from it as well. Until next time, I'll catch you later, and I'll see you then.